The classroom buzzed with noise as students laughed and chatted, tossing their backpacks beside their desks. Just as the bell rang, the door opened, and a new girl stepped inside. She was quiet, her steps light, her head slightly lowered. Nobody really noticed her at first. She didn't say anything. She just walked slowly to an empty seat near the front and sat down, placing her bag on the floor beside her. Her name was Amara. The teacher glanced at the attendance sheet, then at her. "You must be Amara. Welcome." She nodded politely, offering a small smile, but said nothing. The teacher moved on quickly, diving into the morning announcements. Around her, students exchanged glances. Some whispered, others didn't care. New students came and went, but there was something different about Amara. She didn't try to talk to anyone. She didn't fidget or look around the room. She just sat still, listening. When the principal, Mr. Dalton, walked in a few minutes later to check the seating chart, he paused. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on Amara. "You," he said, pointing toward her. "You're new, right?" Amara looked up and nodded. "You'll need to move to the back row. Those front seats are already assigned." The students looked around. No one said anything. Amara didn't argue. She quietly picked up her things and walked to an empty desk in the back corner. As she sat down, someone near her whispered, "Tough luck." Another student snorted. Someone else chuckled under their breath. It wasn't that the back row was a punishment, but everyone knew it wasn't where the focused students usually sat. It was for the ones who didn't care, who slept through lessons or passed notes. But Amara didn't seem bothered. She opened her notebook and listened, her face calm. At lunch, she sat alone. She didn't pull out her phone or try to join a group. She ate slowly, watching the trees outside the cafeteria window. A few students walked by her table, glancing but never stopping. "Who is she?" someone whispered. "Probably homeschooled before this," another replied. "She doesn't talk. Kinda weird." The rumors had already started. Quiet people always made others curious or nervous. Amara was quiet in a way that made her hard to figure out. When the last bell rang and students rushed out the doors, she stayed behind a moment, letting the hallway clear. She walked to her locker slowly, packed her things, and left the building without a word. No one knew where she lived. No one knew where she came from. But they were about to find out. The next morning, homeroom started like any other day. Students filed into their seats, chatting about homework, the weather, and whatever happened on social media the night before. Amara was already there, sitting quietly at the back where she'd been moved the day before. Her notebook was open, and her pencil tapped lightly on the page as she waited for the teacher to begin. Just as the clock hit 8, the door opened again. This time it was Mr. Dalton, the principal. His footsteps were sharp and quick as he entered the room. Conversations faded fast. He held a clipboard and looked serious, the way he always did. "Good morning, everyone," he said, his voice loud but not angry. "I'm just here to double-check our seating chart. We've had a few schedule changes." He started at the front, pointing to each student and checking his list. As he moved down the rows, he occasionally made a note or asked a student to switch places. When he got to the back, he stopped in front of Amara. "You again," he said, almost sounding surprised. "You're still sitting back here." Amara nodded slowly. She didn't say anything. Mr. Dalton frowned. "I told you yesterday those front seats were already assigned, but today I see a few are open." He looked at her, then looked at the front of the room. "Well, never mind. It's better if you stay here. Less distraction for the others." A few heads turned. Someone near the middle row raised an eyebrow. Someone else smirked. Amara kept her eyes on her notebook. She didn't react. "All right," Mr. Dalton said, clapping his hands once. "Carry on." He left the room just as quickly as he had come in. After he left, the room started buzzing again, but now some of the students looked at Amara with new interest. "What was that about?" one whispered. "She just sits there and doesn't say anything," another said. "The principal's got a thing about who sits where," someone added with a shrug. Amara ignored them. She wasn't interested in the gossip. She turned a page in her notebook and started sketching something in the corner. Nothing big, just shapes and patterns. One girl in the middle row, Mia, noticed and tilted her head a little. She'd been watching Amara quietly. She didn't join in the teasing or the whispering. She just watched. When the bell rang, Amara gathered her things like always and left without a word. She moved through the hallway like a shadow, unnoticed by most, but still there. No one asked her to join their group. No one invited her to sit with them. But Maya thought about it. She didn't say anything yet, but something about Amara seemed different, not in a weird way, just in a quiet, strong way. And that strength was about to show itself. By the end of the week, Amara had already become the subject of whispered conversations. It wasn't anything mean, at least not directly, but there were lots of questions floating around the school. Everyone was curious about the new girl. Why was she so quiet? Where did she come from? Why didn't she ever try to fit in? At lunch on Friday, a group of girls sat near Amara's usual table, but they didn't talk to her. They didn't even look at her. They just watched her from across the room, as if waiting for something to happen. Have you noticed her? She just sits there, one girl said, her voice soft but loud enough for others to hear. Yeah, it's like she doesn't care about anything. Maybe she's one of those artsy types, another girl added with a bored tone. Or maybe she's shy, someone said. Maybe she's just too nervous to talk to anyone. The whispers were quiet but constant. Students saw her sitting by herself every day, not making an effort to join any groups, not chatting with others. Some people assumed she was just a shy, lonely girl. Others thought she was stuck up, acting like she was too good for everyone. But then there was a small group of students who seemed to notice something different about her. Mia, who'd sat next to her a few times in the library, couldn't quite figure it out. There was something calm about Amara, something that made her seem different from everyone else. She didn't try to make friends, but she didn't push anyone away either. She just was. After a few days of sitting alone at lunch, Mia decided to sit next to her again. She didn't know why, but something about Amara made her want to get to know her better. She grabbed her lunch tray and walked over, sitting down at the corner of the table without asking. Amara looked up for a second, but didn't say anything. Hey, Maya said quietly, how's it going? Amara gave her a small smile, but didn't answer. She picked up her sandwich, chewing slowly. Mia didn't mind the silence. You know, Maya said after a moment, I've been hearing people talk about you. Amara raised an eyebrow. Not in a bad way, just, well, people are curious, Mia added quickly. You don't really talk much. Why is that? Amara shrugged, not looking up from her lunch. I just don't have much to say. But aren't you bored? Sitting alone all the time? Maya pressed. Don't you want to hang out with people? I'm fine, Amara replied softly, the words almost too quiet to hear. Mia paused, watching her. She couldn't decide if Amara was the quiet type or if there was something more to her, something deeper that she was hiding. After a long silence, Mia said, well, I think you're interesting. If you ever want to hang out, let me know. Amara gave her a tiny nod. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And maybe, just maybe, Mia was beginning to understand that there was more to Amara than the rumors and whispers. It was a cold, gray morning when gym class rolled around again. Students groaned as they shuffled into the gym, some half-heartedly stretching, others just wanting to get it over with. Gym wasn't anyone's favorite class. The loud noises, the sweaty uniforms, and the constant need to move felt like a chore. Amara had never seemed bothered by it. She had shown up, as usual, with her calm, quiet presence. She didn't talk much, but when the coach called roll, she responded with a quick, simple here. Today, the class was doing tennis drills. The coach, a short, energetic man named Coach Harris, clapped his hands together as he stood at the front of the gym. All right, today we're working on our serves. Pairs of two. People, let's get moving. Most students paired up quickly, grabbing rackets and laughing as they got ready to start. Amara stood by herself for a moment, looking around. Mia, who was standing off to the side, noticed this. She hesitated for a second, then walked over. You need a partner? Maya asked, her voice casual but with a hint of curiosity. Amara gave her a small nod. All right, let's go, Mia said, grinning. They grabbed two rackets and walked to one of the courts. The other students didn't pay them much attention, still talking and joking as they got into their pairs. But Maya noticed that Amara wasn't exactly rushing to start. She seemed calm, almost like she was waiting for something. So, Maya began as she stood at the baseline, readying herself. Have you ever played before? Amara didn't answer right away. She was adjusting the racket in her hands, testing the grip. Finally, she looked up and nodded. Yeah. Cool, Maya said, a little surprised. How long have you been playing? A while, Amara said quietly. Then, without warning, Amara stepped forward and launched a perfect serve across the net. It flew with a speed and precision that made Maya step back in shock. The ball bounced in the exact spot where it was supposed to, barely passing the baseline. Whoa, Maya said, wide-eyed. That was amazing. Amara didn't smile. She just nodded once, like it was nothing. I didn't know you could play like that, Maya added, impressed. You should join the tennis team. I'm fine, Amara replied simply, standing still. Mita watched her for a moment, then decided to try her own serve. It was nothing like Amara's, sloppy and slow, barely making it over the net. Amara didn't say anything, but she took a few steps forward and showed Mia how to fix her stance, how to grip the racket properly. She showed her how to position herself and how to swing with more control. It was clear that Amara knew exactly what she was doing. By the end of the class, even Coach Harris had noticed. He walked over and gave Amara a nod of approval. Not bad, he said. Maybe we'll see you at practice sometime. Amara didn't answer. She just gave a small, respectful nod and walked off the court. The rest of the class couldn't stop talking about it. The quiet girl who never said much had just blown them all away. No one expected her to be that good. And no one could figure out why she kept it a secret. The next day, the rumors about Amara's tennis skills were everywhere. It wasn't just the students talking anymore. Even some of the teachers were curious about the quiet girl who had barely spoken but served the ball like a pro. Everyone wanted to know who she really was. At lunch, as usual, Amara sat by herself in the corner of the cafeteria, a book in front of her. Mia, however, couldn't stop thinking about what had happened in gym class. She couldn't understand why Amara had kept her talent a secret or why she didn't try to join the tennis team. Without thinking, Mia grabbed her tray and walked over to Amara's table again. She set her lunch down and sat across from her. So, Maya began, her voice friendly. I heard you played tennis before. Like, really well. Amara didn't look up from her book. Yeah. Why didn't you ever tell anyone? Maya asked, genuinely curious. I mean, you're really good. You could probably make the team. Amara finally closed the book and set it down on the table, her eyes meeting Mia's. I didn't need anyone to know, she said quietly. I just want to be left alone. But you're so good, Maya insisted. Don't you want to be on the team? No, Amara replied simply, looking out the window. There was a long silence as Mia tried to think of something else to say. Amara seemed content with just being herself, without the need for attention. But Mia wasn't ready to let it go. You know, Maya said after a pause, if you ever change your mind, I'm sure Coach Harris would love to have you. Amara didn't respond right away. She just picked up her sandwich and took a bite, like she hadn't heard Mia. But Mia wasn't ready to give up. She leaned forward a little. I think you'd be awesome on the team. You wouldn't be stuck sitting alone all the time either. We could hang out. That seemed to make Amara think for a moment. She lowered her sandwich and looked at Mia, her eyes thoughtful. I don't need friends, she said softly, almost like she was convincing herself. But it's not just about friends, Mia replied. It's about having people who get you. And hey, if you like tennis, it'd be fun, right? There was a slight pause, and for a moment, Amara seemed to soften. She didn't speak, but her eyes held something that suggested she wasn't as sure about staying alone as she'd let on. Maybe, Amara said finally, but I'm not ready yet. Mia smiled. It wasn't a big smile, but it was enough to show that she understood. She didn't push any further, but the seed had been planted. Maybe, just maybe, Amara would open up a little more over time. As the bell rang and the students started gathering their things, Amara stood up. Thanks for sitting with me, she said to Mia, her voice soft but genuine. Mia grinned. Anytime. And as Amara walked away, Mia couldn't help but feel like she'd seen a small crack in the wall Amara had built around herself. It wasn't much, but it was enough to show that there was more to her than anyone had guessed. The next week, word about Amara's tennis skills had spread across the school like wildfire. It wasn't just the students who were talking anymore. Even teachers had heard about the quiet girl who had a hidden talent. During a routine class change, Amara found herself walking down the hallway when she was stopped by none other than Mr. Dalton, the principal. "Amara," he called, his voice louder than usual. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting his. "Can I have a word with you?" Without saying anything, Amara followed him to his office, her footsteps soft against the polished floor. She wasn't nervous, but there was a quiet weight in the air. She wondered what he wanted. As they stepped inside his office, Mr. Dalton motioned for her to sit. He closed the door behind them and walked around to his desk, sitting down in his chair. He didn't start talking right away, just shuffled some papers on his desk. Finally, he looked at her. "I hear you're quite the tennis player." Amara didn't say anything at first. She just nodded once. "I heard a lot about that serve of yours," Mr. Dalton continued, adjusting his glasses. "I think it's time we talk about the tennis team." Amara didn't react. She simply stared at him, her face unreadable. "You know," Mr. Dalton said, his voice softer now, "I think you should consider joining the team. You could really help us out, Amara. You could be an asset to the school." There was a pause. Amara shifted in her seat, but didn't speak. "I don't want to force you into anything," he added, seeing her hesitation. "But I do think it's something worth considering. You're not just some shy girl who sits in the back anymore. People are starting to notice you. They're talking about you, Amara." She finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "I don't want to be noticed." Mr. Dalton leaned forward slightly, his tone sincere. "I get that. But sometimes being noticed doesn't have to be a bad thing. You could use this, your talent, to help yourself and others. It doesn't mean you have to change who you are. Just share it." Amara looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting together in her lap. "I don't need to be on the team," she said quietly. "I just want to be left alone." Mr. Dalton nodded, not pushing her any further. He could see that this wasn't something Amara was ready for. "I understand," he said softly. "But just remember, if you ever change your mind, the opportunity is here. You don't have to be alone if you don't want to be." There was another long silence, and Amara stood up to leave. As she reached the door, she paused and looked back at him. "Thank you for offering," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Dalton gave her a warm smile. "You're welcome, Amara. Just remember, the door's always open." As Amara stepped out of the office and walked down the hallway, she felt a little lighter, but still unsure. She didn't want to change. She didn't want anyone to treat her differently. But somewhere deep inside, a small part of her wondered what it would feel like to belong, to be seen for something other than her quiet nature. It wasn't the right time, but maybe, just maybe, it would be someday. The next few days were a blur for Amara. She kept to her usual routine, going to class, eating lunch alone, walking through the hallways like she was just another student. Nothing really changed, but something inside her was shifting, even if she didn't fully understand it yet. One afternoon, as Amara was walking out of class, she was stopped by Coach Harris. She hadn't expected to see him outside of gym class, and for a second, she thought maybe he was going to ask her to play tennis again. "Amara," he said, his voice warm but serious. "Got a minute?" She nodded, her eyes on the floor. She didn't speak right away. "I've been thinking," Coach Harris said, crossing his arms. "You've got real talent. I know you're not interested in joining the team right now, but I wanted to personally invite you to come to a practice." Amara looked up, surprised. "A practice?" "Yeah," Coach Harris replied, nodding. "I get that you don't want to stand out, and that's fine. But if you ever change your mind, I'd love for you to come by. No pressure, just a chance to see how things work." Amara stayed silent for a moment, unsure of what to say. She wasn't one for attention, but part of her was curious. Tennis had always been something she enjoyed, something that felt like an escape. Maybe seeing a real practice, hearing the sound of the ball hitting the racket again, would bring back that old spark she hadn't realized she missed. "I'm not sure," she said quietly, her voice hesitant. "I don't want to get involved." "I understand," Coach Harris said with a kind smile. Just think about it, all right? No pressure. But the offer's there if you ever want to give it a try. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Amara standing there. She felt a strange mix of emotions, surprise, curiosity, and something else she couldn't quite name. Over the next few days, she found herself thinking more about it. She'd overheard some students talking about the upcoming match and the excitement around the team. They were all so eager, so enthusiastic. Part of her felt like she was missing out. On Friday afternoon, as the school day ended and students started heading out the door, Amara found herself walking toward the tennis courts. She didn't know why she was going there, but her feet seemed to move on their own. When she arrived, the team was in the middle of practice. The sound of rackets hitting balls echoed in the air, and for the first time in a while, Amara felt a spark of interest. She stood by the fence, watching quietly from the sidelines. She wasn't sure if anyone noticed her, but she didn't care. Then she heard Coach Harris call out to her. "Amara, you decided to show up after all?" She froze for a moment, her heart racing. She hadn't expected him to see her. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, I guess so." He smiled at her and waved her over. "Come on in. We've got some extra rackets." It wasn't a huge step, but it was one. And as Amara walked onto the court, she couldn't help but wonder what might happen next. Maybe this wasn't such a bad idea after all. As Amara stepped onto the tennis court, her heart pounded, but it wasn't from nerves. It was something different, something she hadn't felt in a long time: excitement. She wasn't sure where this feeling was coming from, but for the first time in a while, she felt like she was doing something for herself. Coach Harris handed her a racket and smiled. "Glad you could make it," he said. "Just hit a few balls around with us. See how it feels." Amara nodded, her hands gripping the racket lightly. She wasn't used to being part of a group, especially one so open and energetic. But as she looked around at the team, she realized something. They weren't judging her. No one was staring at her. No one was expecting anything from her. They were just there, playing tennis, enjoying the moment. She moved to the baseline and waited as another player, a tall girl with short hair, tossed her a ball. Without thinking much, Amara swung the racket, sending the ball flying over the net with a smooth, practiced motion. It felt like second nature, like it always had. The girl on the other side of the court laughed. "Nice shot," she called. Amara didn't respond, but a small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. She hadn't realized how much she'd missed this. The rhythm of the game, the sound of the ball hitting the strings, the challenge of perfecting the serve. As the practice continued, Amara began to loosen up. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was just playing. And for once, she didn't feel like she had to hide who she was. Coach Harris came over after a few rounds, his eyes bright. "You're a natural, seriously. We'd love to have you on the team, Amara." She paused, holding the racket loosely in her hands. She hadn't expected it to feel this good, to feel so comfortable. "I don't know," she said, looking at the ground for a moment. "I'm not really the team type." "You don't have to be," Coach Harris said. "It's not about fitting into some perfect mold. It's about having fun and playing the game. If you're happy out here, that's all that matters." Amara thought about it for a moment. She didn't have to join the team to be part of something, but just being here, hitting the ball, being around people who weren't judging her, it felt right. "I'll think about it," she said softly, the words more certain than she thought they'd be. The rest of the practice passed by quickly, and before she knew it, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the court. Coach Harris gathered the team for a quick huddle, and Amara stood off to the side, watching them. For a moment, she wondered if she could truly fit in, but then she realized something. She didn't have to fit in to belong. She just had to be herself. As she walked off the court that day, her heart felt lighter. She didn't have all the answers, but for the first time, she felt like she was on the right path. Maybe it wasn't about being the loudest or most popular person in the room. Maybe it was about finding the spaces where she could truly be herself. And as Amara walked away from the tennis courts, she felt something shift inside her. She wasn't ready to make any big decisions yet, but she was starting to see that the quiet girl in the back wasn't so invisible after all. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to step forward.